The metal is moving east, and almost nobody in the West is saying it out loud. While the financial channels argue about the Fed and the stock indexes, real physical silver has been quietly loaded, shipped, and swallowed by the East at a pace that keeps setting records nobody bothers to report. It is not a rumor, it is not a forecast. It is happening in the vaults and on the docks right now, and it is the single most important thing about silver that is not on your television. So let me pay off the title straight away, because you clicked here for an answer, not a tease. The record is real. The East, led by China and its Shanghai market, has been pulling in physical silver so aggressively that its own domestic price has run at a premium to the West. Think about what that means. The same ounce of silver has been worth more over there than over here, and metal flows toward the higher price the way water flows downhill. The shortage the title points to is not a paper shortage. It is a shortage of the actual thing, and the drain is pointed away from us. Now, here is a fact you can chew on before we go one step further, and it costs nothing to understand. The world has run a structural silver deficit for several years running, not one bad year, a stretch of years where the world used more silver than it dug out of the ground, and the gap got filled by pulling metal out of stockpiles that were built up over decades. You cannot do that forever. Every year of deficit is a year you draw down a reservoir that took a generation to fill. And the East has figured out exactly where that reservoir sits, and it has been draining it. I have spent a long time in the gold and silver world, sitting across the table from people trying to protect what they spent a lifetime building, and I will tell you what I have learned to watch. Do not watch the loud number that flashes on the screen. Watch the metal. Watch where the physical ounces actually go. Because the price you see quoted in the West is set largely in a paper market, where far more claims trade every day than there is metal to deliver against them. The physical flow is the truth underneath the price, and the physical flow has been moving one direction for a long time now. Let me put a face on this, because a number is easy to forget, and a person is not. Picture a machinist in Ohio, 61 years old, who has spent his working life making parts you have never heard of that end up inside machines you use every day. He knows silver is not just a shiny coin. He knows it goes into every solar panel, into the electronics, into the contacts and the wiring, into things that get built and never come back apart. He is not a speculator. He just senses, the way a man who works with his hands senses things, that something real is being used up faster than it is being made. He's right, and the people who should be explaining that to him are busy telling him to worry about the wrong things. Here is why the East wants the physical metal and not the paper promise. In much of the West, when people say they own silver, what they really own is a claim, a contract, an entry on somebody's ledger that says silver is owed to them. That works fine until everyone wants the actual metal at the same time. The East has been quietly stepping around all of that and simply taking delivery. Real bars, real ounces, moved into real vaults on their side of the world. When you take the physical metal off the table, you shrink the pile that everyone else's paper is supposedly backed by. That is the part the trading desks do not want you to sit and think about too long. And it gets stranger the closer you look. A domestic price running at a premium is not a small technical quirk. It is the market screaming that demand over there is outrunning the supply the normal channels can deliver. Buyers were willing to pay up above the Western price just to get metal in their hands now instead of later. That premium is a magnet. It pulls bars out of London vaults and out of the deliverable stockpiles in the West and sends them east, ounce after ounce, ship after ship, and the free-floating metal available to everyone else gets thinner and thinner. But here is where it gets strange, in a way that ought to make you sit up. This is not being hidden from you by some grand conspiracy in a back room. It is being hidden in plain sight by simple neglect. The Western financial press covers the price. It almost never covers the flow. So a record-setting drain of physical metal toward the East can happen quarter after quarter, and unless you go looking for it, you would never know. The silence is not a plot. The silence is the business model. A calm, uninformed retiree who does not understand what is happening to the metal is exactly the kind of customer the desks like best. I want to be honest with you here, because honesty is the only thing that makes the rest of this worth listening to. I cannot tell you what silver will do next month. Nobody can, And anyone who looks you in the eye and promises you a price is either fooling you or fooling themselves. Silver is volatile. It can be shoved around hard in the short term by the paper market, and we have watched it happen. Years back, the exchanges raised the cost of holding a silver position several times in quick succession, and the price fell sharply in a matter of days, even though nothing about the actual supply and demand had changed. That can happen again. So this is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. What I am giving you is the pattern and the honest limits of it. And that brings me to the thing I most want you to understand, because it is the lesson underneath everything the East is doing. There is a world of difference between owning a promise and owning a thing. A few years ago, a major nation woke up to find that a large part of its reserves, money it thought it owned, could be switched off with a signature because those reserves were held as somebody else's promise. Not seized in a vault, just frozen, remotely, at the flip of a switch. Central banks all over the world watched that happen and drew the obvious conclusion, and they have been buying physical gold hand over fist ever since, at a pace we had not seen in decades. Because a promise can be frozen. A bar of metal sitting in your own name cannot. Nobody can reach through the screen and switch off an ounce of silver you actually hold. And that is exactly the moment to tell you what you can do about it, because understanding the problem and doing nothing about it is its own kind of loss. This is not just for the insiders and the central banks. If you have $100,000 or more in a 401k or an IRA, this is for you too. My family put together something called the Free Retirement Wealth Protection Guide. It is for American retirees with $100,000 or more in their retirement accounts, and it walks you through how you can move a portion of what you already have into physical gold and silver, held in your name, inside the account you already own, without taxes and without penalties. It is the same lesson the central banks learned the hard way. Own the metal, not the promise. If you are watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. From our family to yours, no obligation and nothing to buy. Now let me take you back to the metal, because the East is not acting on a whim. There is a hard, physical reason silver cannot simply catch up to demand, and it is one of the most overlooked facts in this whole market. Most silver in the world is not mined on purpose. It comes up as a byproduct, a leftover, from mining copper and zinc and lead. That means even when the price of silver climbs and screams for more supply, the miners cannot just flip a switch and dig more silver, because they are really digging for other metals, and the silver just comes along for the ride. Supply is slow, stubborn, and mostly out of anyone's control. So when demand surges, the metal does not appear. The shortage just gets worse. And then there is the other side of it. Beside that separates silver from gold entirely. Gold gets hoarded. Almost every ounce ever mined still exists, sitting in vaults and jewelry and coins, because people treasure it and keep it. Silver gets used up. It gets spread out in tiny amounts across billions of devices and panels and machines. A few grams here, a few grams there, dispersed so thin that it is often not worth the cost of ever getting it back. The old line in the trade is that gold is hoarded and silver is burned. Every solar panel going up, every bit of the electrification everyone keeps talking about, quietly consumes silver that is never coming back to the market. Now put that next to a multi-year deficit and an East that is actively draining the deliverable stockpiles, and you start to see why the ground under this metal is not as solid as the com price would have you believe. And there is one more piece to the paper side of this that ought to trouble you, because it makes the drain more dangerous, not less. On the main Western exchange, a handful of large banks have long carried enormous short positions in silver, bets that the price stays down, concentrated in just a few hands. For years, that concentration has helped keep the paper price calm and heavy. But those positions rest on the quiet assumption that not too many people will ever demand the actual metal at once. Now line that assumption up against reality. The deliverable inventory in the West has been drawn down. The London free float has thinned, and the East keeps taking real bars off the table. The fewer physical ounces there are behind all that paper, the more fragile the whole arrangement becomes. It is a lot of promises stacked on a shrinking pile of metal, and the East is shrinking the pile on purpose. Step back and look at what the biggest players are doing across both metals, because it tells you which way the wind is blowing. Gold has climbed to near record highs, even in a stretch where, by the old rules, it should have struggled, a period of higher for longer interest rates and a Fed that has stayed firm rather than easing. There was a time when gold reliably fell whenever those rates rose. That rule broke. Gold climbed anyway, because something bigger than the interest rate math took over. And that something is the same instinct driving the silver flow east, a global scramble to hold the real thing instead of the promise. Gold has even climbed past other major reserve currencies to become one of the top assets that central banks choose to hold. The people who manage nations' money are quietly reaching for metal. That is the tide. Silver is the smaller, more volatile boat riding on the very same water. Here is the part almost nobody connects, and it is the heart of the whole thing. The Western silver price and the physical silver supply are drifting apart. The price is set in a fast, enormous paper market where you can trade claims on silver all day without a single bar ever moving. The supply is a slow, physical, real-world constraint that does not care what the screen prints this morning. For a long time, the paper market has been able to set a price as if metal were plentiful, but the East is calling that bluff, quietly, by simply demanding the real thing and taking it away. And a paper market can only pretend for so long when the actual metal keeps walking out the door and getting on a boat. I have seen versions of this movie before, and here is how it tends to go. A market can look perfectly calm on the surface for a long, long time, while the real imbalance builds underneath. The screen stays quiet, the commentators stay bored, and then at some point, the gap between the paper price and the physical reality gets too wide to hold, and it closes fast and hard, all at once, and everyone who is watching the wrong number gets caught flat-footed. I am not going to insult you by pretending I know the day that happens. I do not. But I know the shape of it, because I have watched imbalances like this resolve more than once, and they almost never resolve gently. Let me name the fear you might be feeling, because I have sat with a lot of people who feel it. You did everything right. You saved, you worked, you built up a nest egg the honest, slow way. And now you look at it, and you wonder whether it is really as safe as they keep telling you it is. That knot in your stomach is not foolish. It is your instinct noticing that the ground has shifted. The value of what you saved rests on faith in a system, and the biggest players in that system, the central banks themselves, are quietly voting with their vaults against that same faith. When the house is buying insurance while telling the guests everything is fine, it is worth asking what the house knows. And here is the recognition I most want you to walk away with. The smart money is not waiting for a headline. The central banks are already positioned. The East is already moving the metal, already building the stockpile, already paying the premium to get it. They are not going to wait for the Western press to notice. And the Western press, by its own habits, may not notice until the flow has already reshaped the market. By the time this leaves the evening broadcast, by the time your neighbor mentions it over the fence, by the time every advisor is suddenly recommending it, the quiet part will be over, and the price will already reflect what the quiet buyers knew months earlier. The whole edge is in understanding it while it is still boring. That edge does not last, because being early is the one advantage that stops being an advantage the moment the crowd shows up. So let me tell you plainly how I think a person in your position should hold what they own before we close. Never hold so much of anything that a sharp shakeout could force you to sell at the bottom. Size it so you can sit still through the volatility, because volatility is the toll you pay for the metal, and the people who get hurt are the ones forced to sell at the worst moment. Own the physical thing, in your name, not a stack of paper promises that only pays off if everyone else stays calm. And do not chase, and do not panic. The whole point of owning real metal is that it lets you stop worrying about the switch someone else controls. It is not about getting rich in a hurry. It is about making sure that what you built cannot be quietly drained away while you are looking at the wrong number. Which brings me back to that machinist in Ohio, the one who could feel something being used up faster than it was made. He was right, and he was early. And being early is a lonely place to stand, because for a while nothing happens, and you wonder if you saw it wrong. But the East is proving him right, ounce by ounce, ship by ship. The metal is moving, the reservoir is draining, and the West is still arguing about something else. And if you take one thing from me today, let it be this. Do not watch the number. Watch the metal. The number can lie for a long time. The metal never does. And right now, the metal is telling a story the West has decided not to read. And that is why I want to make sure you actually have what you need to act on this, not just understand it. That same free retirement wealth protection guide is yours, and it is built for exactly this. It is about protecting and diversifying a portion of what you spent your life building, and just as importantly, protecting a portion of what your children and your grandchildren will one day inherit from you. This is not only about your retirement, it is about the legacy that outlives it. And for those of you with $100,000 or more in a retirement account who watch this all the way through, mention that when you reach out. And we will set up a free one-on-one educational web conference just for you to walk through how this works for your situation. There is no fake deadline here, and I will not pretend there is one. But I will tell you the honest truth about timing. The moment to make a calm, unhurried decision is exactly the moment when nothing feels urgent. And that moment is right now, while this is still quiet and still early. If you are watching on your television, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguy.com. From our family to yours, no obligation and nothing to buy. Take care of what you built.